Hey, Adam here, and welcome back. Before we get into this disappearance, I just wanted to say that I've been following this one since it happened. And this one is pretty gut-wrenching, and my heart really goes out to the family. They deserve all of the support in the world, and I hope that they get the answers that they deserve. It's important that this incident isn't just forgotten, and I would like to ask that people be respectful to the family and not to cast aspersions and just to be responsible. Now, with that said, we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Braylen Noble, and these are all of the facts. Only official news sources have been used here. Right, Braylen was 3 years old, he was autistic and non-verbal. This might ring a bell already because I covered 2 boys just like that who disappeared under unusual circumstances towards the end of 2020. I'll link that video now somewhere at the top of the screen and in the description if you want to learn more about it. So Braylen disappeared on the 4th of September 2020 from the Hunters Ridge Apartments, which is in the city of Toledo, which is located in Ohio. At 12:30 in the afternoon that day, Braylen's mother called the police because she couldn't locate her son in their home. She said that she believed that he may have fallen from a 3rd floor apartment window shortly after 12 PM, and that she hadn't seen him since. Now, I'm sure you can imagine, but law enforcement arrived quickly and they began immediately knocking on doors and scouring the entirety of the apartment complex. They went into the surrounding buildings too, but they had no luck finding Braylen. Behind the apartment is a body of water which they searched extensively, but Braylen was not there. Behind the complex there's a wooded area which was also searched with K9 units, drones and with people on foot. The search dogs never found Braylen's scent. On the 5th, here's what was reported by 13 ABC News. Toledo Police Lieutenant Kelly Lendhart said crews were dispatched and it's all hands on deck. We're working in conjunction with the Fire and Rescue Service. We're using every available resource to locate this child. First responders searched the entire apartment complex using K9 crews, drones, as well as a dive team within the Hunter Ridge's pool. The Hunters Ridge apartment complex also runs adjacent to a deeply wooded area that includes a body of water. Now, this body of water is Swan Creek, which as said was searched and in the process of being searched. The Sun then reported this. Mystery surrounds the whereabouts of a 3-year-old boy from Ohio who vanished from his family's home. Braylen Noble, who cannot speak, went missing on Friday from an apartment on the 3rd floor of an apartment block, and his mum fears he fell out the window. Sterling Rahi, a Toledo Fire and Rescue Department spokesman, said, "It's very rough terrain back there, a very steep downgrade. We've searched a quarter mile in each area from this area, maybe even beyond that, with nothing found. It's been searched multiple times. All of the adjacent buildings have been searched." Now, after searching and repeated searching, because they couldn't find Braylen or any trace of him, the FBI got involved. At this point during the research, one question that was on my mind was the door locked? Now, you'd imagine so if the primary suspicion was that he'd exited through a window. Because if the door was unlocked, then surely it would have made more sense to suspect that someone had entered the apartment. Now, because that hasn't even been mentioned, we pretty much have to run with the idea that the door was in fact locked and there were no other entry or exit points other than the opened window. Let's be clear here too, you'd think that if this boy had fallen from a window, then he would have been found immediately. I don't think there is any other possibility had that have been the case. So if he hadn't fallen, could someone have seen him and taken him from the window? This is the 3rd floor of an apartment block, so that's hard to believe. It'd be hard enough getting up there and then to get back down whilst carrying a 3-year-old. It's not impossible, but how likely is that? Obviously that's not a question I can really answer. Now, there were some frustrations building up in the community. One family in the area stated, and I assume she's talking about the authorities, they aren't trying to do too much because if they were, they'd be out here right now searching. We can't get them out here to search, and by 12 o'clock it'll be 24 hours that Braylen's been missing. One detective did counter this statement though, saying that their presence was focused in the Swan Creek area with search dog teams. I can only imagine that because they weren't finding anything, which is beyond bizarre if the assumption was that he'd fallen out the window. They perhaps thought he could have wandered down to the creek. Though in this situation, you would have expected the search dogs to find a scent, but that can't possibly have been the case because the search ended in failure. Unless, of course, the dogs led them to the creek and then lost the scent. Only that was never stated, so it looks like they just didn't find a scent, and the creek was based on an assumption. On the 6th, 13 ABC News reported that by around 8 PM, one of the search groups had found a tent filled with clothing and a blanket. This was reported to law enforcement, and detectives on scene filed it as possible evidence. Though we do learn later that there is no connection between Braylen and the tent. By this point, at least some family members had the obvious suspicion that Braylen may have been taken. The grandparents stated this: "All I want to know, wherever he's at, whoever has him, please return him, set him free. There won't be any problems, set my grandson free." A user on Twitter put this more succinctly: "There's more to this. A 3-year-old will not walk away after falling from a 3rd floor window." Yeah, there clearly has to be more to this. It's very difficult to dispute that. So what are the options then? As said already, was the door unlocked? Did he fall and he was caught? Did someone climb up to get him? What an incredibly unusual situation. To disappear from the house in this manner, leaving no trace behind. It's odd. Now, apparently the searchers had also found a hole that had been dug up in the woods, and they said it hadn't been there when they searched previously. I do want to make it clear though, that from what I understand, this was never linked to have anything to do with Braylen, nor was he found there. On the 8th, Kim Sauter, who was a search organiser, stated this: "There's only 2 resolutions. Braylen has passed away, or someone has taken Braylen." Right, now we're moving on to the 9th, and things are about to get bizarre. According to 13 ABC News, the Lucas County coroner has confirmed that the body found in the Hunters Ridge pool was that of 3-year-old Braylen Noble. Police had previously searched the pool area on Friday after Braylen was reported missing, but returned on Wednesday after days of searching turned up nothing. According to Lieutenant Lendhart, it's common practice in police investigations, once an area is searched, if nothing is found, to go back and revisit the search area and see if anything was missed. But we do want to reiterate that the area was searched numerous times by Toledo Fire and Rescue, the FBI, private search groups, and both live and cadaver dogs. There's a reason that Lieutenant Lendhart had to clarify that last part there, because at face value it looks pretty damn negligent to then state that the body was found in an area already searched, because it makes it seem like it wasn't searched properly. However, in my view, and I'm sure the view of a lot of people, he wasn't missed during the first search at all, he just wasn't there in the first place. Right, let's find out some more about this pool area. According to ToledoBlade.com, the pool, set into a hillside adjacent to one of the complex's buildings and Swan Creek, is completely surrounded by fencing. Property management had to unlock the gate for members of the Toledo Fire and Rescue Department's Special Operations Team to enter. Okay, the question immediately becomes, how in the world did this boy manage to get into the pool? If it's securely locked at all times, then I can't imagine he just wandered in there. Now, we're going to have to get bizarre again. Let's hear what the coroner's office had to say. This was reported by pretty much everyone, but let's have a look at WTOL 11 News. On Thursday afternoon, the Lucas County Coroner's Office released initial details on the autopsy of Braylen Noble, finding no obvious signs of trauma on the boy's body and also saying that drowning has not been ruled out yet as a cause of passing. More investigation is planned by the Coroner's Office. The autopsy on Braylen Noble showed no anatomic cause of passing and no gross evidence of trauma. Drowning has not yet been ruled out as a cause of passing, but further studies and investigations are needed before the final ruling is issued. The coroner, who performed the tests on Braylen, said she did not see anything to account for the passing, such as disease or trauma. No cause nor manner of passing has been determined. Or in other words, we have absolutely no idea how this boy came to pass away, and the results obviously raise far more questions than they answer. In fact, they don't really answer any questions at all, come to think of it. You know, we've got one of those situations again. In all of the articles, absolutely none of them are poking any kind of questions at this. You have a young boy that disappeared under very unusual circumstances, and then he's found 5 days later in a pool that you've already searched thoroughly with dogs too, and the area is under lock and key. And all I'm hearing is this boy was found in an area already searched. Anyway, right, just going back a moment actually, the autopsy does answer some questions. Given that the coroner pretty much stated that there was no trauma, you can pretty confidently exclude a fall from a 3rd story window because there's absolutely no way you don't find a shred of evidence of that. Not to mention he was then found in a pool that wasn't anywhere near beneath the window. On the 11th of September, Fox 8 then reported that the authorities have not said that this is a criminal case, which means they couldn't find a single shred of evidence to suggest that a third party had been involved here. Although, let's be honest, there's absolutely nowhere on this earth they didn't suspect it. Right, we're skipping to the 24th now because there wasn't much in the way of updates until that time. We actually get some more details in regards to the actual moments surrounding the disappearance, so let's examine WTOL 11 News. A search warrant executed in the case of 3-year-old Braylen Noble shows that the same day the toddler was reported missing, police searched the apartment and seized items in case the boy's disappearance turns criminal. As a result of the search warrant, police seized a cigarette butt found on a chair on the balcony, an Amazon tablet, a Samsung tablet, 6 mobile phones, a claw hammer, and a box of Glad trash bags. Braylen's grandmother was listed as the possessor of the seized property. The warrant says Braylen's mother told detectives that she last saw her son with his grandmother in the apartment. The mother returned from the apartment's balcony and she told police her mother told her that Braylen had gone into his bedroom and shut the door. It's difficult to know what to do with that information. The grandmother allegedly was the last person to see Braylen before the disappearance, and she told the mother that he'd gone inside his bedroom and shut the door. That's certainly odd, but I would urge care in being accusational here because I know how that could be perceived. It's also worth bearing in mind that as per the autopsy, they couldn't find a cause of passing. So if, let's call it negligence or worse had happened here, that would have been obvious and visible to the coroner. Whereas, as said, they basically had no idea why Braylen passed away. So a question that I think is absolutely vital here is how, when, and in what manner did Braylen leave the apartment in the first place? I'm quick to point out bad reporting, so I should probably do the same about good reporting, and I would just like to say that the Toledo Blade did a great job. They were more inquisitive than most throughout, and despite there being no real updates, they were trying to keep the disappearance in the spotlight. Interestingly, in one such article, they opened with this statement: investigators have issued no updates a month after a missing toddler's body was found in a swimming pool at the apartment complex where he lived. So in all fairness, it does seem like at that time, the police could find no evidence whatsoever in regards to whether foul play had been a factor here, which honestly is beyond strange now. And actually, I want to reiterate just how strange this is by jumping ahead to the 9th of December 2020. Because there was basically radio silence up until that point. Here's what was reported by WTOL 11 News. It was 3 months ago to this day that the search for Braylen Noble ceased being a missing persons investigation. There have been no updates from officials regarding this investigation. When Braylen disappeared, there was a window open, so the assumption was that he'd fallen out because the screen was pushed in. But neither women inside actually saw him fall. The missing child triggered an extensive search by law enforcement and private search parties. 5 days later, his body was found floating face down in the half-filled complex pool. The coroner found no obvious signs of trauma and no manner of passing has officially been determined. I'm sure that you can appreciate that there were people who were just absolutely up in arms about what had happened here, and they were demanding justice. Just in response to that, Lieutenant Kelly Lendhart stated this: while the investigation remains ongoing, police cannot charge someone with this at this time when the cause of passing is not ruled to be as a result of foul play. On the 18th of December, the Toledo Blade updated with this: police have questioned the boy's mother and grandmother who lived at the apartment, but since Braylen's passing, there mostly has been nothing but silence. Someone somewhere knows something about how a little boy got from a 3rd floor apartment into the swimming pool. Someone has information that can answer the questions in this case. Just so we're clear, that's the end of the paper trail, at least thereabouts. Honestly, unless they're able to prove that a third party was involved here, or something equally nefarious had have happened, I think you can classify this as being similar to the many other disappearances covered on this channel and the missing 411 disappearances that are covered by David. With all of the evidence that we have so far, no one saw Braylen disappear, and if the grandmother is correct in that he went into his bedroom, there's your moment of separation. There was an open window in the apartment that appeared to have been pushed in, so with the assumption that the door was locked, you can see why they believe Braylen had left through the window. Searchers immediately arrived on scene and searched the complex entirely. The search teams were large and they had cadaver dogs and drones on hand. The dogs never found Braylen's scent at any point during the search, nor did the drones make any positive identifications. The swimming pool in which Braylen was found was searched previously and repeatedly. Cadaver dogs were present during these searches, and I know I'm repeating myself now, but they did not find Braylen's scent. Then, 5 days after the initial disappearance, there Braylen was in the very area that had been searched and searched again by various organisations, including the FBI. When Braylen's body was sent to the coroner for autopsy, the coroner had absolutely no idea why Braylen had passed away. Without any further information or evidence coming forwards, this fits the bill down to a T. So what happened here? I have absolutely no idea, other than again, we have a bizarre set of circumstances that don't make any sense. And what's frustrating too is that just how risky it is that someone would place Braylen in the pool where there was still an active presence of searchers and community members around the area. Would that happen? I don't know. The pool is under lock and key, which arguably makes it all the more difficult in placing him inside there, instead of the creek for example. Strange. Right, now moving on from Braylen's disappearance, let's travel to the Umatilla National Forest in Oregon. I think a lot of you might know this if you've been here for a while, but I have a profound interest in autism. I used to work with autistic children who were just all over the spectrum, which is why I went to university in the first place. What shocked me is just how many incidents there are of autistic persons disappearing without a trace, especially going back in time too. I've never done much research into the historical basis of autism and when we came to realise how prominent it was. For example, if you go back 60 years ago, science believed that as little as 5 children per 10,000 were autistic. Now we've realised that depending on the country, it could be as high as 400 per 10,000. The diagnosis back then was only given to children who demonstrated severe developmental delays. Thankfully, we know today that it's slightly more complicated than that, and autism can present in a number of ways. I was scouring older newspapers and I came across a man known as Keith Zunke. Now, it's not my place to be diagnosing people, nor am I even qualified to do that. However, the newspaper that I came across in 1981 had a very familiar description of this person. He was non-verbal, he was infatuated with keys, probably because he enjoyed fiddling with them, just the way they felt and the sounds they made. This person certainly had developmental delays, and I'm just picking up that this person was almost certainly autistic. May have been, let's put it that way. Now let me just be clear, not all autistic people have an obsession of keys, nor do they have intellectual problems. You'll actually find that a lot of these people rank quite highly in terms of IQ distribution. Anyway, the point is, I want to tell you what happened to Keith. So Keith was a resident at the Stone Creek Lodge, a Walla Walla group home for those that needed extra care. As a result of that, it's probably safe to assume that Keith was a low-functioning individual. Well, the Stone Creek Lodge group, with a counsellor and a former employee who had good relations with the lodge, went for a hike in the Umatilla Forest. The group travelled there in a van, which they parked in a clearing right next to the road. Jim Carey, perhaps an unfortunate name here because I'm not talking about the actor, but rather the sheriff at the time. Jim said that the group had been hiking at a very slow and relaxed pace, and had been walking around but were never more than 150 to 200 yards away from the van. As they were hiking, Keith, along with 2 other residents, wanted to return to the van, though it's not clear why. It's important to note here that these men couldn't verbalise why they wanted to go back, but in their own way they let the counsellor know, who then watched as they travelled in the direction of the van. However, the real problem arose when the rest of the group went back to the van. The 2 non-verbal men were there, but Keith was missing. When asked where Keith was, they both pointed into the forests towards a nearby skid road. One pointed them up the road and the other pointed down the road. While Keith had problems, employees described him as one of the more independent persons in the lodge. The search for Keith began very shortly after he disappeared, and many people were in the forest through the night. They found no trace of him at all, and the search had to be called off in the morning because the area was blanketed with about an inch of snow. The search did continue, of course, after the weather settled. The search organisers described a sense of bewilderment. They stated, "We've always found something, but this time we haven't found a thing, not even a footprint that could be identified." Here's another quote directly from the article. "About 30 men conducted a final grid search of the snow-patched area yesterday in the immediate vicinity of Keith's disappearance. Standing almost shoulder to shoulder, the grim line inched slowly over the forested ground looking for anything unusual or any small item in the thick underbrush. Specifically, they were hoping to find a key which could indicate a direction of travel, but nothing turned up, not a key, shoelace or even a scrap of paper. As one perplexed searcher, Ken Paul of the US Forest Service put it, You wonder where he could have gone. You wonder what really happened. Sheriff Carey shook his head when asked the same question. He said, "That's what bothers us, we don't know." The search for Keith lasted for 2 weeks. They had search dogs who never found his scent. They had helicopters overhead and many people on foot inside the forest. Nothing ever turned up. No keys, no clothing, no footprints. They never found anything of Keith at all. It's unfortunate in this instance that the other 2 people with Keith were non-verbal. I wonder what they'd seen or what they'd heard. Did he simply just walk off? Was he distracted by something? Was he worried? It's of course possible that he just walked off, but you'd have think that he would have been located if that had been the case. Right, that's enough from me. I'm going to hand this one over now because I'd quite like to hear some of your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Please do leave a like if you found the video interesting, or a dislike if you didn't. I'm just looking for your honest opinion. I'd also just like to say a massive thank you to the patrons who help make these videos possible, so thank you all very much. If you'd like to contribute to the research effort, then you can find the link to that in the description below. Other than that, I hope you've had a great day or evening, depending on where you are. Be safe guys, and I'll see you next time. Peace.